Hello everyone and welcome to another video. What is the highest guest count you have ever had? 3,000? 5,000? 8,000? Ha, that's all peanuts. And that is why I set myself the challenge of building a park that can accommodate over 50,000 of those little tiny peeps. No traps, no glitches, just a normal park that 50,000 guests are voluntarily staying around in. So I started building and building and building, and I never stopped. I did this all live on Twitch, and after just 3 streams I already had quite a sizable park with over 21,000 guests. There really is a bit of everything. There's a lot of flat rides, a bunch of custom designed roller coasters ranging from small to quite large, there are some micro coasters, some heavily themed areas and more. One thing you may notice is that this park starts in the middle of the plot instead of the usual side. I have built quite big parks before, but it always annoyed me that they were basically semicircles against one side of the plot, so this time I wanted a full circle. I did this by digging a trench for the guests to walk through to enter the park and giving myself construction rights over that, which allows me to build over that trench and complete the circle. There is a little problem though, and that is that this park, despite its 190 rides, is not nearly big enough to accommodate 21,000 guests comfortably. And if we look closer at any bit of path, we will indeed see severe overcrowding. Opening up the guest thoughts window shows that more than 6,000, nearly a third of all the guests in the park, are complaining about it, which severely reduces their happiness. The only way to combat this happiness reduction is with a lot of entertainers, and I have 1,015 of those. This costs over 75,000 euros a month, which I am financing by charging 500 euros for park entry. I knew ahead of time that I would have to find some way to make insane amounts of money to afford all the staff I would need. I could have gone with charging for the ride, but dealing with lots of maximum ticket prices that change because rides get older wasn't a nice prospect, so instead I just made all the guests spawn with $1,000 so that I could charge a ton for the entrance once I built enough rides. Right, let's continue building. Progress seems a bit slower now as the park has grown a lot, so it needs a lot more rides to double in size, but in reality I'm still building new rides at roughly the same speed as before. Another 3 live streams later, the park looks like this and has nearly 38,000 guests. There are several new notable rides in the park, and the most notable is obviously the gigantic white hyper twister coaster in the back. This actually isn't even a custom design, but rather a pre-built that comes with RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 Deluxe. That version includes a whole bunch of user submitted designs, and this one is by far the biggest with over 10 kilometers of length and a price tag of over 312,000 euros. I've never built it before in a proper park, but it doesn't even look too out of place in this very big and quite dense park. I also built another hyper twister that goes around the entire park, although at this point it's already getting a bit obscured by new rides being built around it. Because it's so big, it's one of the most exciting rides in the park, along with the big green Giga Coaster and of course the aforementioned freaking-normous Hyper Twister U1114. Another thing I did is build more scenery around the rides that are more in the middle. I found a lot of the bits where it was just a coaster on some grass to look quite empty, so I changed some of the terrain and built a lot more scenery. It looks a lot better now, and I will keep on adding more throughout the rest of this playthrough. Another 2 streams later, at the end of the 8th one, we hit the goal of 50,000 guests, but we're not nearly done yet. 50,000 guests is lovely, but I can still build more rides, so why stop? We will continue on building until we reach the ride limit of 1,000. By the way, I actually had to save and reload once because I failed the scenario. This 50,000 guest goal comes with a restriction of never letting the park rating go below 700 for more than 4 weeks in a row, or your park will be closed. Usually not a problem as long as you hire enough entertainers to combat the overcrowding, but the rides are getting old and they are crashing a lot. It does take more than 1 or 2 crashes to get park rating problems, but if a lot of crashes happen at the same time, it can become an issue. Up until 49,600 guests, we never got too many crashes too quickly, but then suddenly there were 2 crashes just 14 seconds apart. This is still not too much of a problem. We lost a few guests and the park rating went down a bit, but it's still above 700, so no problems, right? Well, just 1.5 minutes later, the massive Hyper Twister also decided to crash. This brings our park rating a fair bit below 700, but we're still fine as you have a grace period of 4 weeks to get it up again, and the casualty penalty will go down quickly enough for that to happen. But of course, just 3 minutes later another roller coaster crashes, and this one is a big blow. The park rating had recovered back to about 700, but now it's gone down to roughly 400 and it will not recover in time. We have now lost the scenario and failed the goal. Luckily I anticipated something like this happening, so I had already made a backup save. I loaded that and renewed the rides that crashed so that they wouldn't crash this time around, and we reached the goal without any issues. Currently we're on a count of 641 rides and stalls, so there is still a good way to go until we reach that limit of 1000. Let's continue building. From this point onwards, the park turns more into a square rather than a circle. I didn't really intend for this to happen, it just kind of did. I guess it's easier to build a square than a circle. At some point I did come up with a cool idea, and I marked the outer ring of the map so that I could keep my park perfectly centered on the middle. It's pretty clear now that I'm not going to fill the entire map before I reach 1000 rides, so that outer ring will be for something else. During stream 10 we hit another limit, the sprite or entity limit. There can only be so many entities on one map, and we have now reached this limit. This limit is 65,136, and our 56 and a bit thousand guests combined with a few thousand staff members and a whole bunch of ride vehicles get us to that number. This is actually a problem, as now we can't get any more guests and our income stream of €850 per park entry is gone. With nearly 6,000 staff members, our money is disappearing quickly, so I fired about 1,500 entertainers. This causes guests to have a bigger chance to become unhappy enough from overcrowding to leave, making space for a new guest. For the rest of this playthrough we will be at or just below the sprite limit, and it's a careful balance of having enough entertainers to keep the people somewhat happy, but not having too many to get stuck at that limit and lose our income. One thing I should say is that this park is only possible because of OpenRCT2. In the original game the ride limit was 255 and the sprite limit 9601, meaning a park this big is just impossible. A few years ago OpenRCT2 increased these limits so that we can create much bigger parks, and it's amazing. We keep on building more and more, and the additions become quite small in later streams as I'm trying to fill the gaps while also making sure I don't hit the limit of 1000 rides too quickly and be stuck with an open space that I can't fill. After 16 live streams of about 2.5 hours each and a little bit of offline building afterwards, the park is finished. It contains a total of 1000 rides and stalls and has over 57,000 guests. Because it reaches both the ride and sprite limit, I have decided to call this Limit Park. Limit Park is truly massive, and it's a never-ending sea of all kinds of different rides. Roller coasters, flat rides, water rides, tower rides, stalls and more. Whatever kind of ride you prefer, you can find it here. The very center of this park is this fountain in this pond, and then it goes 101 tiles in every direction until you hit the wooden fence that surrounds the park. Outside of that there is a big moat, turning the park into an island. Let's have a look at what kind of rides there are in this park. That limit of 1000 is shared with shops and stalls, so we don't quite have 1000 rides. Instead there are 728 rides and 272 shops and stalls. Of these rides, roughly a quarter, 188, are roller coasters, although a good number of these are microcoasters, and those function more like flat rides than coasters. So let's instead look at the ones I put effort in and only have the roller coasters I custom built in this scenario. That's still 105, a number I'm very happy with. Every single roller coaster type is built at least once here, but the most common one is the wooden coaster with a grand total of 7. But what about other rides? What's the most common ride in the park? That would be the motion simulator. They are the smallest ride outside of the tiniest of mazes, being just 2x2, and unlike the spiral slide they're also not very tall. This makes them the perfect candidate to fit in tiny spots and also under things like roller coasters. If you include the microbus ride, which is really just a retextured motion simulator, then there are a grand total of 94 of them in the park. If we remove every other ride, then you can see the white dots that are the motion simulator spread all around the park, infecting every corner of it. There are also 50 Ferris wheels and 46 spiral slides. The spiral slide because it's also just a 2x2, and the Ferris wheel because it has the unique ability to be just one tile wide, including the exit and entrance buildings, which no other ride can do, and that makes it very useful to fill up narrow bits of land. And that was kind of my mentality when building this park. Sure, you could just build a roller coaster and move on, but that is going to look a bit empty, so it either needs some scenery work with different terrain, like this stand-up coaster, or it needs a load of other rides under and through it, like this multi-dimension coaster. With that strategy, we built over 700 rides in total, but the question is, which are the most exciting? There are 5 rides with over 10 excitement. First up is 9.99 All Around, which is a wooden coaster that, as the name says, had initially 9.99 excitement and intensity, but some later editions bumped it up to 10.11. This is followed by Return of the Spendierhosen, a go-kart that goes around the entire park and does 10 laps, which take over 45 minutes to complete. And because the path leading to the park is in a canyon, this go-kart can just go straight over it, and thus it's truly a pure 195 by 195 square with 10.19 excitement. At number 3 we have the ride that the go-kart is named after, the original Spendierhosen. Just like the go-karts, this one goes around the entire park, or rather when I built it in Stream 4 it went around the park, but since then it has been fully enveloped by it. Just after finishing constructing it, it still had less than 10 excitement, but all the extra stuff built around it has bumped it up slightly to 10.48. The silver medal goes to a hell of a giga coaster, which is simply a big giga coaster with a high top speed that has 10.51 excitement, because it's a giga coaster. That's very high, but there can be only one winner, and that is of course the massive pre-built Hyper Twister U1114, which we renamed to RRP Our Monthly Profit, because we lost a lot of money when we built it. With its massive length, synchronized stations and a lot of scenery under it, it comes to a massive 11.22 excitement, the highest in the park. The rides with the lowest excitement ratings in the park are 2 car rides with just 0.4 and 0.38. Usually the car ride has quite a bit higher excitement, but the rather long minimum stat requirement of 200 meters that these two both don't reach means their excitement gets divided by 8. Outside of these two, it's a merry-go-round that does just 4 rotations and gets 0.8 excitement. The most intense ride in the park is 9.99 All Around, with of course 9.99, so none have gone over 10. The least intense ones are all the observation towers, as they always have exactly 0.00 intensity. The highest nausea goes to launched freefall number 2, which due to its downward launch mode gets a super high nausea rating of 9.77. The highest one that isn't a freefall or rotodrop, as they claim the entire top 13, is Kruimeltjes, a multi-dimension coaster with 8.45 nausea. The lowest is again 0.00, as a variety of rides just have no nausea rating by default. The ride with the most customers in total is Hybrid Coaster 1 with over 219,000. This makes sense, as it was built rather early on and has a very high capacity. Now that the park is bigger, there are a bit fewer guests around, but earlier on there were just so many guests around that a lot of the rides reached their maximum throughput, and this one had a huge advantage due to its high capacity and short ride time, allowing it to process a lot of guests per hour. This expansion of the park after this is also why we don't need as many entertainers anymore. Just before we hit the sprite limit, there were 5,000 entertainers in the park because everything everywhere was super overcrowded. But now that it's finished, there's a lot fewer guests in the same area, so 2,442 entertainers is enough. You can also see this effect when you look at how many guests are complaining about this overcrowding. After Stream 10 we also had about 57,000 guests in the park, but more than twice as many of them were complaining, with nearly 20,000 instead of just under 10,000. Back to the popularity contest. The most popular stall is Lemonade Stall 1. I'm not sure why specifically this one, but with 162,000 total customers it's really far ahead of the 128,000 of number 2, Balloon Stall 5. Drink stalls in general do very well and they possess many of the top spots. That's simply because food is much more important, as that keeps the guest energy high, so I have more food than drink stalls. However, there is one facility that has had even more guests than Hybrid Coaster 1, and that is Toilets 1. It's the oldest toilets in the park and it's right next to the central pond. This area has generally been extremely overcrowded with a lot of guests, and since this shopping center has 2 food and drink stalls but only 1 toilet that doesn't have to share with anyone, it wins the trophy for most popular thing in the park with 224,000 total customers. The most profitable thing in the park is the park entrance with over 65 million euros in total profit, of which I have less than 3 million left. That's not very surprising when you spend nearly 200,000 per month on staff, which is already less than it used to be. The moat around the park also cost at least 5 million euros to build. The oldest guest still in the park is guest 26, who entered pretty much immediately and has now been in the park for over 49 hours. He has consumed over 150 items of food and drink combined and has bought 22 souvenirs, of which 12 are balloons that he keeps letting go of. His stats window says he's been on just 255 rides, but that's because it cannot count past that number. In reality, this guy has probably been on about 500 rides if I compare it to other guests that do still have accurate numbers. Actually, I lied. There are 2 older guests in the park. Guest 15 and 20 are still around, but they haven't been on too many rides, as somewhere during stream 5 I trapped them on a single path tile with 4 benches and nothing else. They were renamed to Bench Beauty and Bench Geek because this stream happened right after I was invited to be on the reality TV show Beauty and the Geek. I declined. There are also a bunch of staff members who have been around for a while. During the first few years of this playthrough, I had a channel point reward to fire all my staff that my Twitch viewers could use, so the oldest staff members are from year 6. The oldest mechanic still around has inspected 710 rides and has fixed 320, and the oldest handyman has swept 974 litter and emptied 249 bins. There's also one special handyman, our grass mowing slave, who shortly after he started working for us was designated to do nothing but mow grass. Nowadays there isn't too much grass for him to mow anymore, but back in the day he would mow vast swaths of empty grasslands. Over the past 41 or so years he has mown over 17,800 tiles of grass. What an absolute madman. And that was Limit Park, the biggest park I have ever built. I would have made it even bigger, but I had hit the limit. If you want to take a look at it yourself, you can find a download link in the description. To see the densest park I have ever built, you can click right here. Thank you all for watching and I will see you in the next video.